When I was 15, my world revolved around sleepovers, late-night talks, and endless laughter with my best friend, Emma. We had been inseparable since middle school, and her house often felt like my second home. Her parents adored me, her little dog followed me around, and everything about being there felt comforting and familiar. But there was one thing about Emma's house that wasn't just background noise in my life: her older brother Jaden. Jaden was 2 years older than us, and in the beginning, he was just Emma's annoying brother. He teased us when we stayed up too late, rolled his eyes when we giggled about crushes, and sometimes stole snacks from us when their mom wasn't looking. To me, he was just part of the scenery. That was until the summer before junior year. That summer changed everything. It started small. Emma and I spent almost every day together, and Jaden was around more than usual because he had just gotten his driver's license and a summer job. I noticed little things that I had somehow ignored before: the way his hair fell over his forehead when he leaned down, how he always carried himself with this effortless confidence, and how his laugh seemed to fill a room. He wasn't just Emma's brother anymore. Suddenly, he was Jaden, and I caught myself paying more attention than I should have. I brushed it off, thinking it was just a silly crush, something that would fade like so many of my schoolgirl crushes. But it didn't. One afternoon, Emma and I were in her backyard by the pool. It was unbearably hot, and she ran inside to grab drinks, leaving me alone by the water. Jaden came out, tossing a basketball in his hands, and sat down near me. He wasn't wearing a shirt, and I swear my brain short-circuited for a moment. He looked over at me, smirking, and said, "You've been hanging around here so much, I'm starting to think you live here." I laughed awkwardly, muttering something about how Emma would probably love that, but my cheeks betrayed me, burning bright red. He noticed, I'm sure of it. Moments like that started happening more often. A passing comment, a shared glance, a smile that lingered just a little too long. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. I started to feel torn inside. Emma was my best friend, the person I trusted with everything, but how could I explain that my heart seemed to skip every time her brother walked into the room? The guilt weighed on me, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. Then came the night of Emma's birthday party. Her parents let her invite a bunch of friends, and the backyard was filled with music, fairy lights, and the smell of barbecue. Everyone was dancing, laughing, and celebrating. I was having fun, but my eyes kept drifting to where Jaden stood with his friends. He looked older than the rest of us, more mature, and when he caught me staring, he gave me this subtle smile that made my stomach flip. Later that night, when the party died down and most of the guests left, I went inside to help clean up. Emma was outside saying goodbye to people, and I found myself alone in the kitchen with Jaden. He leaned against the counter, sipping soda, and asked, "Did you have fun?" I nodded, trying not to sound nervous, and we ended up talking. Not just small talk, but really talking. About school, about what he wanted to do after graduation, about my dreams too. It felt strange how easy it was, like I was seeing a different side of him that nobody else got to see. That conversation stayed with me, even after I went home that night. From then on, I couldn't deny it anymore. I was falling for him. But falling for Jaden wasn't simple. It wasn't like crushing on a random guy from school. This was Emma's brother, someone who was supposed to be off limits. If I admitted it out loud, I risked losing my best friend. So I kept it to myself, quietly battling with my own feelings, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But my heart didn't listen, and slowly, I began to realize that keeping this secret wasn't going to be easy. After that night in the kitchen, it felt like something had shifted. I couldn't tell if Jaden felt it too, but I knew I did. Every time I was at Emma's house, I found myself hyper-aware of his presence. The way he walked past me, the way his cologne lingered in the air when he left a room, the way his voice carried from upstairs, it all left me on edge, like I was carrying a secret I couldn't let slip. Emma, of course, had no clue. She was wrapped up in her own world, busy with cheerleading practice, school drama, and talking endlessly about the new boy she had a crush on. I envied how easy it seemed for her. Meanwhile, I was stuck dealing with a crush that could ruin everything if it ever came to light. One Saturday, Emma and I were supposed to go to the movies, but she canceled last minute because she wasn't feeling well. I didn't want to sit at home, so when Jaden asked if I wanted to join him and his friends for a pickup basketball game, I surprised myself by saying yes. I wasn't athletic by any means, but watching him play was something I wasn't about to turn down. We drove there in his car, and the ride was quiet at first. Then he asked me about school, about the classes I liked, and the conversation flowed again like it had that night in the kitchen. It was so natural, so easy, and I found myself wishing the drive would never end. At the game, I sat on the sidelines, cheering him on. His friends teased him about bringing me along, but he brushed them off, throwing me a playful smile that made my heart skip. Afterward, we stopped at a diner for burgers and fries. It wasn't planned, but sitting across from him in that little booth felt like the most important moment of my life. We talked for hours about music, movies, and everything in between. He made me laugh in a way no one else did, and when he looked at me, it felt like he was actually seeing me, not just Emma's friend, but me. When he dropped me off at my house later that night, there was this pause before I got out of the car. He looked at me, almost like he wanted to say something, but instead he just said, "See you around," with that same smile that always melted me. I went to bed that night with my heart racing, my mind replaying every word, every look. But as much as I wanted to hold on to the happiness, guilt crept in again. What would Emma say if she knew? Would she feel betrayed, or worse, would she hate me? That thought haunted me. A few days later, Emma noticed something was off with me. We were in her room, painting our nails, when she suddenly asked, "Do you like someone? You've been acting weird." I froze, nearly spilling the nail polish. My mind raced, searching for an answer that wouldn't give me away. I forced a laugh and said, "No, not really. Just stressed with school." She believed me, or at least she pretended to, and went back to talking about her own crush. But inside, I felt like a liar. I hated hiding things from her, but what choice did I have? The weeks went by, and Jaden and I kept finding ourselves in these little moments together. Passing by each other in the hallway, brushing hands when we reached for the same snack, sharing glances across the dinner table. None of it was intentional, but it all felt like something was building, like we were caught in this invisible current pulling us closer. Then one evening, it all came to a head. Emma had gone to a football game with her friends, and I stayed behind because I had a headache. I was lying on the couch watching TV when Jaden walked in, holding a bowl of popcorn. He sat down next to me, too close, and offered me some. We watched in silence for a while, but the air between us felt heavy charged. At one point, our hands touched in the bowl, and neither of us pulled away right away. I glanced at him, and he was already looking at me. The look in his eyes made my breath catch. It wasn't playful or teasing like before, it was serious, intense. My heart pounded so loudly I thought he could hear it. He leaned in slightly, not enough to cross the line, but enough to make it clear that the thought was there. I panicked and quickly stood up, mumbling something about getting water. He didn't stop me, just watched me walk away. In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter, trying to calm down. What was I doing? What were we doing? It was dangerous, reckless, and yet part of me wanted to run back in there and see what would have happened if I hadn't moved. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying the almost moment, the unspoken tension between us. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that one wrong step could send everything crashing down, but also knowing that maybe, just maybe, falling wouldn't be so bad. After that night on the couch, I couldn't look at Jaden the same way again. Every time I was at Emma's house, I felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for another moment like that to happen. He didn't say anything about it, and neither did I, but the tension was always there, humming in the background like static electricity. Emma, as usual, was oblivious. She was too caught up in her own world to notice the glances I shared with her brother or the way my hands shook when he was near. At times I almost wished she would notice, just so I didn't have to keep carrying the weight of this secret alone. One Saturday, Emma invited me over for a study day before our big history exam. We spread our notes across her bed, highlighters and sticky notes everywhere, and tried to focus. But after an hour of half studying and half gossiping, She fell asleep beside me, her notebook still open. I lay there staring at the ceiling, and that was when I heard footsteps. Jaden appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame, his expression unreadable. He pointed at Emma and whispered, "Out already?" I nodded, pressing a finger to my lips. He smirked and motioned for me to follow him. I hesitated, glancing at Emma, then quietly slipped out of the room. He led me downstairs to the kitchen, where he poured 2 glasses of lemonade. We sat at the counter, and for a while, we just talked. It was simple: school, friends, his plans after graduation, but beneath the surface, it felt like more. Every time his eyes met mine, I felt that pull again, stronger than ever. Then he said something that made my heart stop. "You're not like Emma's other friends," he told me. "You're different." In a good way. I froze, staring at him. He didn't elaborate, just took a sip of his drink like he hadn't just flipped my world upside down. My thoughts spiraled for the rest of the day. What did he mean? Was he just being nice, or was there something more? That night, lying in bed at my own house, I replayed his words over and over, convincing myself they had to mean what I wanted them to mean. The more I thought about it, the harder it became to hide how I felt. I started noticing the smallest details about him: the way he tapped his fingers when he was thinking, the way his voice softened when he was being sincere, the way he always held the door open for me without making a big deal out of it. Every little thing made my feelings grow, and I couldn't stop it even if I wanted to. A couple weeks later, Emma's parents went out of town for the weekend, leaving her and Jaden in charge of the house. Naturally, Emma invited me to stay over. We planned a movie marathon, junk food, and a night of doing nothing. Jaden was around too, and I tried to act normal, but inside I was nervous. That Friday night, Emma fell asleep halfway through the second movie, her head buried under a blanket. I stayed awake, quietly scrolling through my phone, when Jaden walked in. He looked at Emma asleep on the couch, and then at me. "Want some air?" he asked softly. My heart jumped. I nodded, careful not to wake Emma, and followed him out to the backyard. The night was cool, the sky clear with 1,000 stars. We sat on the porch steps in silence for a moment, listening to the crickets. Then he asked me about school, about whether I was nervous for finals, and we talked quietly. It felt so intimate, sitting there in the dark, our voices low like we were sharing secrets. At one point, he leaned back on his hands and looked at me. "You know," he said, "you're easy to be around. I don't have to try so hard with you." My chest tightened. The way he said it, the way his eyes lingered on me, made it clear that he meant it. And I knew then that whatever this was, it wasn't just in my head. But that realization terrified me. This wasn't just a crush anymore. It was real. And if I let it happen, if I let myself fall for him completely, there would be no going back. I thought about Emma upstairs, sleeping without a care, trusting me completely. And I thought about what would happen if she ever found out. The risk was too big, but the temptation was stronger. That night, when I finally went back inside, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, my heart torn in 2 directions. On one side was my loyalty to Emma, my best friend, my sister in every way but blood. On the other side was Jaden, who was slowly becoming the only person who could make my chest ache and my stomach flutter at the same time. I didn't know how much longer I could keep this balancing act. Something was going to break. And deep down, I think I already knew which way I would fall. The breaking point came faster than I expected. It was the second night of that same weekend. Emma had invited a couple of friends over earlier in the evening, and the house was filled with laughter, music, and the sound of chips being crunched. But once everyone left and Emma went upstairs to get ready for bed, I found myself in the kitchen alone, cleaning up the mess. I was putting away bowls when I felt someone behind me. Jaden. He reached over to grab a plate, his arm brushing against mine, and suddenly the air between us thickened. I turned to face him, and our eyes met. Neither of us said anything. It was like we both knew what was about to happen, like we had been circling this moment for weeks. Then, before I could second-guess myself, he leaned in. His lips brushed against mine so softly I almost thought I imagined it. But then it deepened, and there was no mistaking it. We were kissing. My whole body lit up with nerves and excitement, and for a few seconds, I let myself forget everything else. When we finally pulled away, breathless, reality came crashing back. I panicked. "We can't," I whispered, stepping back. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "I know," he said quietly. "But tell me you don't feel it too." My silence was the only answer he needed. Because I did feel it. I felt it so strongly it scared me. That night, I lay awake in Emma's room, listening to her steady breathing as she slept peacefully beside me. Meanwhile, I was in turmoil, my lips still tingling from Jaden's kiss, my mind spinning with what it meant. The guilt hit me harder than ever. Emma was my best friend, and I was keeping the biggest secret of my life from her. I wanted to tell her to come clean, but I knew it would destroy everything between us. So I stayed silent, burying the secret deeper inside me. Over the next few days, I tried to act normal. Around Emma, I pretended nothing was different, but every time I saw Jaden, my chest tightened. He didn't push me, didn't bring up the kiss, but the way he looked at me told me it was on his mind too. It became impossible to ignore. One afternoon, Emma asked me to come over and help her pick outfits for an upcoming dance. We were in her room, clothes scattered everywhere, when Jaden knocked on the door. He needed Emma's help with something, so she left me there alone. A few minutes later, he came back without her, closing the door behind him. My heart jumped. "We need to talk," he said. I stood frozen, staring at him. "About what happened," he continued. "I don't regret it. Do you?" My throat felt dry. I shook my head slowly, because no matter how complicated it was, I couldn't lie. I didn't regret it. Not even for a second. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then maybe we stop pretending." My pulse raced as I looked at him, torn between fear and desire. "But Emma," I started, but he cut me off gently. "I know. She's your best friend. But I can't keep pretending I don't care about you." His words hit me like a wave, and in that moment, I realized just how much I had already fallen. I wasn't sure when it had happened or how, but Jaden wasn't just Emma's brother anymore. He was the boy who saw me differently, who made me feel like I mattered in a way no one else did. That night, when I went home, I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. Maybe it was reckless, maybe it was dangerous, but I couldn't deny the truth anymore. I had fallen for Jaden. And whether I liked it or not, things would never be the same again. After that conversation, it became impossible to go back to how things were. Jaden and I tried to keep our distance, but every glance, every accidental touch, felt charged with something we couldn't ignore anymore. We didn't say it out loud, but there was an understanding between us. Something was happening, and it was only a matter of time before the line we were walking disappeared completely. A week later, Emma invited me to stay over again. She had a cheer competition coming up and wanted me there to help her practice her routines and relax afterward. I agreed, even though part of me was terrified of being near Jaden again. When I arrived, the three of us had dinner together with their parents. It was ordinary, casual, and I forced myself to act like nothing was going on. But under the table, I could feel Jaden's foot brush lightly against mine, just once. Just enough to make me nearly drop my fork. Later that night, Emma fell asleep early, exhausted from practice. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. I heard a soft knock on the door, and, before I could react, Jaden slipped inside. My heart leapt into my throat. He gestured for me to follow him, and even though every rational thought screamed at me not to, I got up and tiptoed after him. We ended up in the quiet of the backyard, the cool night air wrapping around us. The stars were bright again, just like the last time, and for a moment, it felt like the world had shrunk to only the two of us. He looked at me, his expression serious. "I don't want to keep sneaking around," he said softly. "I know this isn't simple, but I don't want to pretend I don't feel something for you." My chest tightened at his words. Hearing them out loud was both exhilarating and terrifying. "Jaden, if Emma finds out," I started, but he cut me off gently. "I know, but I'm not asking for anything crazy. Just let me know if you feel the same way." The truth slipped out before I could stop it. "I do." The second I said it, his face softened, and he reached for my hand. It was such a small gesture, but it felt monumental, like a door had been opened that we could never close again. We stood there in silence, our hands intertwined, both of us knowing we had crossed into something new. That night was the beginning of everything. After that, we started finding excuses to be around each other when Emma wasn't paying attention. Quick conversations in the hallway, secret smiles across the dinner table, lingering goodbyes when I left the house. Nothing obvious, nothing Emma would notice, but enough that I carried the weight of our secret with me everywhere I went. The more time I spent with him, the harder it became to hide. He made me laugh in ways no one else could, made me feel seen and understood. It wasn't just a crush anymore, it was real, and it was growing. But the guilt never went away. Every time Emma hugged me, every time she called me her ride or die, I felt the knot in my stomach tighten. I hated lying to her, but how could I tell her the truth? She would never understand, and I couldn't risk losing her. One afternoon, the three of us were hanging out in the living room. Emma was scrolling through her phone, ranting about her crush ignoring her texts, while Jaden sat across from me pretending to watch TV. At one point, our eyes met, and he smiled, just a small, secret smile meant only for me. My heart raced, but then I saw Emma glance up, and I panicked, quickly looking away. She didn't notice, but it was a close call. That was the moment I realized how dangerous this was becoming. We weren't just sharing glances anymore. We were living in a secret world that was bound to collapse if we weren't careful. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before Emma started to notice. The close calls kept piling up, and soon it felt like every moment was a gamble. Jaden and I became experts at hiding in plain sight, but there were cracks starting to show. Emma wasn't stupid, she noticed details, even if she didn't understand them at first. It started with small things. One day, she frowned when she caught me laughing a little too hard at one of Jaden's sarcastic comments. Another time, she asked why I always seemed to go downstairs when she was in the shower. I brushed it off with excuses, but I could tell she was watching me more closely. One Saturday afternoon, Emma and I were in her room trying on outfits for a school dance. Jaden walked by in the hallway and made some teasing remark about how long it was taking us. I rolled my eyes at him, but when our gazes locked, I forgot to look away fast enough. Emma's head snapped between us, her brow furrowed. "What was that?" she asked. My stomach dropped. "What was what?" I said too quickly. "That look," she pressed. "You looked at him weird." I forced a laugh, shaking my head. "You're imagining things." I was rolling my eyes at him. She didn't seem convinced, but she let it go for the moment. That night, I couldn't stop replaying the conversation in my head. She had noticed. She wasn't sure what she had seen, but she had seen something. And if we weren't more careful, the whole secret would come out. The thought terrified me, but at the same time, part of me was tired of hiding. I wanted to be honest, to stop feeling like every moment with Jaden was stolen. A week later, Emma invited me and a few other girls over for a sleepover. It was supposed to be just like old times, face masks, pizza, gossip, but it felt different now, heavier somehow. I tried to relax and enjoy myself, but every time Jaden walked past the living room, I felt my pulse race. At one point, when the girls were busy with a TikTok dance, I slipped into the kitchen for a drink. Jaden was there, leaning against the counter, scrolling on his phone. The second he saw me, his whole face lit up and that warmth spread through me like it always did. "You hiding from the chaos too?" he asked with a smirk. "Something like that," I whispered back, smiling despite myself. We stood there, too close, the tension pulling us together. For a second, I thought he might reach for my hand, but then we heard footsteps. Emma walked in, her eyes narrowing when she saw us standing there. "What's going on?" she asked, suspicion lacing her voice. My heart stopped. "Nothing," I said quickly, holding up my drink like proof. "Just getting water." She glanced between us, clearly unconvinced, but she didn't push it right then. Instead, she turned and walked away, leaving behind a silence heavier than before. That was the moment I knew. She was starting to piece it together, and no matter how careful we were, we couldn't keep this hidden forever. Later that night, when everyone was asleep in their sleeping bags on the living room floor, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my chest tight. Jaden had been right. We couldn't keep sneaking around. Something had to give. Either we came clean, or we stopped before we ruined everything. The problem was, I couldn't imagine walking away from him now. I was already in too deep. The next day, Emma was quieter than usual. She didn't say anything outright, but her glances were sharper, like she was testing me, waiting for me to slip. The tension between us was unbearable, and for the first time, I felt the fear of losing her creeping in stronger than ever. Because if Emma confronted me and I had to choose, I wasn't sure which way my heart would go. The tension didn't take long to explode. A few days later, Emma asked me to come over after school. She said she wanted to vent about cheer practice, but the second I walked into her room, I knew something was off. She wasn't smiling, her arms were crossed, and she didn't even offer me a seat like she usually did. My stomach twisted. "What's wrong?" I asked carefully. She looked at me for a long moment before finally saying, "I'm not stupid. Something is going on between you and Jaden." My heart dropped to the floor. I tried to deny it at first, stumbling over words, but the look on her face told me it was pointless. She already knew. "Emma, it's not," I started, but she cut me off. "Don't lie to me. I see the way you look at each other. I saw you in the kitchen the other night. How long has this been happening?" Her voice cracked, and it made my chest ache. "It just happened," I admitted quietly. "I didn't mean for it to, I swear. I never wanted to hurt you." She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "You're my best friend. How could you keep this from me? Out of everyone, why him?" I wanted to explain, to tell her how I had tried to fight it, how I hated keeping it from her, but how my feelings for Jaden had grown too strong to ignore. But nothing I said would make it better in that moment. To her, it was betrayal. She didn't yell, didn't scream, but her silence was worse. She just looked at me like I wasn't the person she thought I was. I left her house that evening feeling like I had lost everything, my best friend, my safe place, the person who had always been my other half. For days, Emma barely spoke to me at school. She avoided me in the hallways, ignored my texts, and when she did look at me, it was with hurt in her eyes. Jaden noticed, of course. He cornered me one afternoon outside the library, asking what happened. When I told him, he sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "I knew this was coming," he said softly. "She was bound to find out." "She hates me," I whispered. "I've ruined everything." He shook his head, stepping closer. "No. She's hurt, but she doesn't hate you. Give her time." His words comforted me, but the guilt still gnawed at me. For weeks, it felt like I was walking through quicksand, torn between the boy I was falling for and the friend I had lost. But slowly, things began to shift. One afternoon, Emma pulled me aside after class. I braced for her to tell me our friendship was over, but instead, she sighed heavily. "I still feel betrayed," she admitted. "You should have told me. But I can't stop you from liking who you like. I just don't know how to deal with it yet." It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was a crack in the wall she had built between us. I promised her I'd be honest from then on, no matter how messy it was. It took time, but eventually she began to warm up again. It wasn't the same as before, not right away, but it was enough to give me hope that I hadn't lost her forever. As for Jaden, he was patient. He didn't push me, didn't demand anything I wasn't ready for. He just stayed close, letting me know he was there whenever I needed him. And the more time I spent with him, the more certain I became that what we had was worth the risk. Falling for my best friend's brother changed everything. It complicated my world, broke trust, and forced me to face choices I never thought I'd have to make. But it also showed me what it felt like to care for someone in a way that went beyond crushes or fleeting feelings. It was real, deep, and terrifying, and I wouldn't take it back. In the end, Emma and I found our way back to each other, even if our friendship had to grow into something new. And with Jaden, I learned that sometimes the people we're meant to be with are the ones we least expect. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And for the first time, I stopped being afraid of what might happen and started believing in what could.